it's Charles Barkley with Wayfair. It's outdoor season, and my patio setup better be ready to play. That's where Wayfair wins. Patio seating, umbrellas, and grills, all delivered fast and easy. Shop wayfair.ca now.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome back. So we're going to talk about something that has been in the news and out of the news and in the news and actually been discussed for, I think, at least more than a decade now, and that is the Gordie Howe International Bridge, the one that links Windsor, Ontario, to the state of Michigan, to Detroit, and all the machinations that have, certainly in the past couple of months anyway, come from this, which is an original date to open, then everyone was invited, then it was canceled, then Donald Trump didn't want it, then Pete Hoekstra, it goes on and on and on. So the good news, I think, is that there is an official date now. That is supposed to be July 27th when this Gordie Howe Bridge actually opens. Ryan Donally is president of the Windsor, Essex Chamber of Commerce, and he is on the line. Mr. Donally, thanks for the time. Let me begin by asking, first of all, I know we're talking a lot about this now, but this really has been a thing that's been debated now for many, many years.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And it has been something that's been topical for a number of years, and I say actually a number of decades. I think the idea of this first started back at the 9/11 when we recognized national security was not perhaps as secure as we thought it once was. And then it got kicked into high gear about a decade after that. This opening in the next couple of weeks signifies 20 plus years of work from a number of different agencies and associations, and it's exciting to know that it's only a couple weeks away, I think.
Yeah, the big part of there is, I think. I mean, we have heard a couple of different sort of takes here from depending on who you actually, listen to. On the Canadian side, I think we heard the Prime Minister say the other day, because the idea was, when we first heard it from the U.S. saying that they'd let this go ahead and happen, that profits from the bridge would be split, which I think made some Canadians scratch their heads, realizing that the bulk of the expenditure on this bridge, almost $5 billion, has been all of Canada's. So to certainly just start to split profits didn't seem to make sense. But then the Prime Minister sort of gave us the impression that those profits would be net profits that would be split. In other words, after Canada covers all its costs, then we start splitting the money on tolls, et cetera, with the U.S. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's my understanding too, is that it's based on removing the capital cost, removing the operational cost, and removing the carrying cash cost of the bridge. And then whatever that remaining profits are, that would be split 50-50, with that going into what sounds to be an economic development fund. Now, of course, the interesting thing is the details aren't brought forward. So, if this were a capital cost that's expended over 100, 150 years, there may be a pot of money available at the end, because that total capital cost would be harder to pay down. And if it's a 35-year payback, or whatever they determine that depreciation to be, then that capital cost very much is very negligible. And it sounds like everything I've heard is that it's on the very negligible side as far as what that profits may be.
All right. We've also heard the U.S. president suggest that, by virtue of what happened just a couple of days ago when this announcement was formalized, that it would be opening up at the end of this month, that it was a better deal for America, which is, of course, something you'd expect to hear from the American president. Was the financial structure, the financial issue here always top of mind, or what held this up for so many years, do you think?
Well, I mean, the agreement itself is between the Canadian government and the state of Michigan. And actually, construction began on this in the previous Trump presidency, which is interesting. The most recent changes, there was the idea that a conversation or a backroom conversation with Matty Maroon, who's the owner of the Ambassador Bridge, signaled the American government to essentially push pause on this, renegotiate a deal. I think that was substantiated by a news outlet in the United States. But regardless, as you started this segment, it was an on again, then off again quickly type of relationship. Now, over the last couple of days, we've heard that this is reopened because it's a better deal for America. I would contend that it may be, it may not be. I don't know if we'll get those details, but that information is not coming out from Canadian government, but it doesn't mean that that's the Canadian government choosing not to have that released. Perhaps it is the American government that just wants this as a political win, as opposed to a potential financial win. And that's why the details are not being released.
Right.
Again, I'm just throwing that out there, surmising, but that could be part of the reason why we're not hearing many details.
Can you just, for our listeners here, explain how significant this is to have this bridge open? So you mentioned the Maroon, the people who own the other bridge right now, who we found out, of course, subsequent to this, that they've been contributed or have contributed in the past to both the president's campaign and also to Pete Huckster's campaign, the U.S. ambassador to Canada. What does this mean for Windsor, for the Windsor-Essex region?
Well, I think it's Windsor-Essex region, but it's also Ontario and Michigan, and quite more than that. I mean, the economies of Ontario and the Midwest and even Canada. Right now, our border crossing situation, we've got Windsor-Detroit Tunnel, which primarily serves passenger vehicles. We've got a commercial border crossing, the Ambassador Bridge, which is privately owned by the Maroon family. And then a couple hours up the road, we've got the Blue Water Bridge, which is a crossing between Sarnia and a little bit farther north in Michigan. For decades, the Ambassador Bridge was the busiest border crossing in North America, with approximately 1/3 of commerce between Canada and the United States crossing that bridge. We're talking $300-400 million a day in commerce that crosses that bridge. So what this means is a number of things. Of course, this is now a bridge that's built highway to highway. So previously, trucks would have to get off the highway, drive down a city street, Huron Church, hit anywhere from 7 to 8 stoplights along the way, and then get onto the Ambassador Bridge, which is a 100-year-old piece of infrastructure and is showing 100 years of aging. Now what's happening is our 401 is built directly into the Gordie Howe Bridge, and then from there you directly enter I-75, which is a north-south corridor in the United States. So it's cutting costs, it's cutting time, it's cutting greenhouse gas emissions. It's more predictable for business. So obviously from the logistics side of it, it's important. But also from the security and redundancy. A handful of years ago, at the beginning of COVID, there was a shutdown of the Ambassador Bridge by the trucking convoy. That threatened to shut down the entire automotive industry in the United States and in Canada because of the just-in-time delivery system and nature that's been built over the last 60, 70 years. So both the national, international security, and also redundancy is also doubled down now because the Gordie Howe is opening. So finally, you can also cycle the bridge and cycle and walk it. So it's free for pedestrian traffic, and that'll increase tourism on both sides.
Do you have a number for what this is supposed to bring in toll-wise? Any clue? Has there been a projection?
I don't. I mean, I've heard models anywhere from 50% of the current Gordie Howe or current Ambassador to 75% of the traffic will move that direction. Over the past number of years, the Ambassador Bridge has also ratcheted up their toll rates. So what happened is a lot of the commercial traffic started moving to Sarnia, the Blue Water Bridge. And that is really not built for commercial traffic. In fact, the mayor of Sarnia has come out and say, get off our roads, if you will, go to the most appropriate crossing. And now this most appropriate crossing will be open, and that's the Gordie Howe Bridge. So, we're talking thousands of trucks a day that cross the Ambassador Bridge currently. 8,000 trucks a day is some of the numbers I've seen. So it could be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 trucks that now cross the Gordie Howe times whatever that rate is, plus whatever the passenger volume is.
I would ask a question, maybe it's a bit unfair or hypothetical, but we know, of course, Windsor,
Sure.
as the sort of center of the automotive industry. Does this have a practical advantage for Windsor in terms of that industry specifically?
Oh, I think it does. I alluded to it earlier, but the auto system in North America is built on a just-in-time system. So, a part may be, first molded here in Windsor, and then it may be shipped somewhere in Ohio, there's value-added content on there. It's shipped back to Canada, and maybe new value-added content's made. I mean, right now we've got, the Chrysler Pacifica, which is final assembly in Windsor, Ontario. Parts in that vehicle cross 7 times, and that's all on a just-in-time model. So previously we had an Ambassador Bridge where you'd literally have to drive down a traditional city street with multiple stop signs and traffic lights. And now, that predictability of business, the cost and time savings, which I've heard anywhere from 8 to 20 minutes time savings when you cross the Gordie Howe. That just, you start multiplying that out by thousands of trucks a day. That's significant real cost savings. and it makes our entire southwestern Ontario and quite honestly the Michigan region more competitive for global business.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed that, in fact, it does open on July 27th, which is the latest we have heard.
It will.
Yeah. All right.
It will.
I hope I don't have to call you July 28th to ask what happened. So,
you know what? I hope not. To that point, when I was hearing rumors last week that it was opening, I had to reach out to a couple of my colleagues on the U.S. side of the border, and my stakeholder network here in Canada said, "Hey, is this real this time?" And sure enough, the next day the Canadian government came out with a statement, and it was shared by the federal government too with the U.S. So it seems as real as I've ever heard it, and I'm looking forward to a couple weeks from now.
We leave it at that. Mr. Donally, thanks so much for your time. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir.
iHeartRadio is throwing it back
2010s, the decade.
to the days of huge hits and unforgettable anthems. A non-stop stream of the biggest and best
Drake, Rihanna, Beyonce, Katy, Gaga, The Weeknd,
and more. All your decade-defining favorites all in one place.
Hi, it's Katy Perry.
Hey, it's Bruno Mars.
This is Kesha.
Find 2010's The Decade on the free iHeartRadio app. Preset the station so it's always one tap away.